Welcome to Small Business Showcase, where we meet small business owners who are making a difference and having an impact. And now, your host, Mark Rosenberger.
Welcome to Small Business Showcase interview, where we get to interview businesses that are making a difference and having an impact. And today I am fired up to be able to hang out with Pierre
Clemenceau.
Help me with that last name.
Clemenceau.
Clemenceau, there you go.
Yeah,
Every time I say it, you got that French accent on it. I love it. Who has spent over 23 years in the recruiting industry. So here's a guy who has forgotten more than most of us know about recruiting, and he loves it. He's impacted hundreds of both people and companies. So what a treat to hang out with you today, Pierre. Pierre, thanks for being here today.
Pleasure. Absolutely.
So recruiting, you got an interesting pedigree. I saw electrical engineering, software, something. Give us a little of your backstory and how you got into recruiting.
So I initially came out of school, out of engineering school in electrical engineering, and I did that for a few years in a medical equipment company, working for a company that develops life support systems and respirators. Ventilators is another term for you. It's a device they use in intensive care units where if somebody for whatever reason has where the heart or the brain have an injury and they can't recover, that's the last device that they unplug, right? They pull a plug on that machine. So I developed initially electronics and then afterwards the software for those devices. And they're all computerized, and they're even these days they're even more computerized. I did that for a few years on the development side. Then I moved into technical marketing. Then I moved into technical sales and so forth, and did that in Europe, Asia, Latin America, North America, and so forth. And my company at that point, which got acquired by GE Medical, the company was called Omida. They got acquired and they opened up a division in the U.S. in the Washington D.C. area, Columbia, Maryland, to be exact. And they asked me to see if I could transfer to the US to help them launch their product in North America, which I did. And then ended up getting into that market. And after probably 5 years, and then I decided to go back to business school. Since I had an engineering degree, I wanted to complete that with a business degree, which I did for a couple of years. And then afterwards, I got into selling software sales, and for embedded technology, for security systems and so forth. And I did that for several years. And then I realized that I was on the road all the time. And I got to a point where I thought it would make sense to still use my network, but not have to be gone for 3 or 4 weeks at a time. And be able to come home at night for dinner kind of thing. So I ended up getting into the recruiting industry that's still serving the same industries I used to work in. So that's a condensed version of my story.
Wow. So you're serving industries that you've played in and worked in. So
right.
Experience there, that's cool. And then went from electrical engineering, software engineering, and made the natural transition into recruiting. I mean, doesn't everybody do that, right?
That gives me some credibility with customers,
Yeah.
and that also helps me better comprehend and understand their products and what they're doing and how they fit in the marketplace and how they compete with others. So that has helped me over the years to better decipher what kind of candidate would be good for them and so forth.
Oh, I would think your pedigree would be hands down light years ahead of most recruiters. In fact, there's a lot of recruiters out there, as you know.
Yeah.
Talk a minute about what makes your approach you different.
Most of the time, my customers are so either they're North American companies or European companies, and they're like I said, in the software and the SaaS, software as a service, or cybersecurity or embedded technology markets. And most of the time, they're either a U.S. company looking to get a foothold in Europe, so helping them hire a VP of sales in Paris, France, a chief marketing officer in Germany, a director of engineering in London, for example, or helping a European company launch their U.S. division, and whether it's the first managing director in the U.S. or their team, essentially. So that's where we played most of the time. But I still help U.S. companies in the U.S. and European companies in Europe, right? Essentially.
Yeah,
But that's
perfect.
my competitive advantage is having a chance to know both industries in both territories.
Yeah, so you got a pretty narrow niche of expertise and leverage it accordingly.
Yeah,
That's great. So,
right.
let's say I'm a business, I'm looking for somebody, I've got a big need. How do you make my life better as a business?
Um, so, well, companies they can go, we have clients that go look on their own, right? But most of the time, a VP of sales, a chief technology officer, a marketing officer, they don't have time to scour the internet to look over all the social networks to kind of keep on calling their own network of contacts to figure out who they can potentially hire. So that's where they sometimes they start doing that themselves, and they realize very quickly that they run out of time and effort, and obviously they're of bandwidth. So they end up calling us saying, "Hey, we've tapped on the shoulders of 5, 6 people that we know in the industry. They're not interested or they're not qualified. It's time for you using a professional to jump in and do the job." And that's when we get involved.
Now you also have another, I'll call it customer, but that's the candidate, right? That's
Yeah.
how
So
how do you make their life better?
we're dealing with a three-headed monster most of the time. It's the company, it's the hiring manager, and it's the candidate. And it's probably one of the only industries where the product can say no. Like we know when you're selling a piece of software, a hardware, a car, a plane, a building, whatever, the product has no say in in the transaction. Well, here, um, you know, the you have to first sell the hiring manager that you can use. They're able to that you're qualified for them and they can use your services. Then you have to sell them on um, telling them that you can potentially help them fill their position. Then you got to sell the candidate on the fact that you can help them out in their next career move. And then you have to sell the candidate to the client. So there's a lot of selling going on, right? But how to make the candidate's life a bit more easy is, of course, they can go on LinkedIn, they can go on social networks, they can contact their own network of connections to find their next job. But no, we know their background. We most of the time have their resume, so we're probably going to come across opportunities that they're not even aware of, essentially. So they can kind of compare those opportunities with their own, and often they end up, choosing ours because we know their background and we know when they're qualified and when not qualified, and we open doors that they would never have thought of, essentially, in a certain way.
Well, and in talking to you previously, one of the things I really liked was you're a master at putting their best foot forward, if that's the right way of saying it, or
Yeah, yeah. We tend to get the sizzle from them, their competitive advantage, what makes them stand out, and so forth. And we present that to hiring authorities. When people submit a resume through LinkedIn or through a web portal or any other process, applicant tracking system and so forth, their resume comes in as is the other 200 that came in that week. So just they're going to be at the bottom of the pile. Nobody's going to notice them. Whereas we make a conscious effort to really reach out to hiring authority and present their background and present, why they're good for for the company and so forth. And we sell their background to the client, at least to get a phone conversation going, right? Or a
mhm.
video call. And then
Yeah,
afterwards, it's up to the candidate to take it from there, of course. Right.
yeah, great.
Yeah.
But so, and I noticed too something that's different, especially if you're a candidate watching this, is you're a little different in how you charge or bill or who pays for what. As a candidate, am I
Oh, yeah.
paying or?
So it's since the mid 50s in the US and maybe even before that elsewhere, it's always been employer paid fees. So back in the 40s, there was a big, people couldn't find jobs and stuff like that. So people ended up paying recruiters to find them an opportunity. But now it's the other way around. There's a lot more opportunities than there are positions, a lot more people than there are positions. So therefore, it's really employers are seeking out this. The need is on the employer side, right, and not on the candidate side, essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
So what are some of the biggest challenges in the industry these days?
Separating the boys from the men and the girls from the women in a certain way, where a lot of companies are getting inundated with candidates applying left and right through their website, through portals, through social networks and stuff like that, and they don't have time nor the money to go through hundreds of profiles and stuff like that. So finding talent that would come on board, have a short learning curve, right? It doesn't take them a year to come up to speed. Those are really some of the competitive advantages, and bringing talent to their door that knows their industry, that knows the technology, that's already done this before, had positive results, had been successful doing this versus the trial and error of hiring somebody and then 6 months later realizing they're not working out, letting them go. They lost 6 months of potential revenue there. So that's an opportunity cost. And then they got to go
Right.
back to the square one, meaning they got to go hire somebody else and train somebody else. And it takes it could be really, it's an opportunity cost. Like I said, it could be really expensive for them essentially.
So any fun success stories?
Um, I place people, I mean, I place, I mean, I have had, I'm not going to say I've seen everything, but I've seen the pretty wide extremes, meaning I place people in sometimes in a minute, right? I talk to a client, they say, hey, I'm looking for this, is this. I pick up the phone and I exactly knew who to call. I talk to the person in a minute conversation. They were interested. I send in the resume and I get a placement fee, right? Or I'm walking a trade show. There are probably 400 or 500 people in a software trade show, and I know several people at the booth. I have a client that's at booth ABC. I have a candidate at booth XYZ. I bring the candidate to the client, say, you guys should talk, grab a cup of coffee, and then do that discreetly, and end up making a placement that way. I've also had situations where people, I've worked on searches for 9 months, and it took sometimes 9 months, if not more, for a chief sales officer or for a chief marketing officer, right? So it was a very long search that ended up, taking a lot of time and probably costing me money more than the client.
Right.
And then I have situations where I place a candidate and they gave me their resignation. They had a 2 months notice. This is in Europe. They have a 2 months advance notice. So they had to stay in their existing employer for 2 months. They ended up leaving that employer. But in the meantime, the company that hired them got acquired by another company. So they ended up going to the new company, knocking on their door. I'm ready to start. You guys made me an offer. I'm ready to start working. That was a couple months ago. Well, things have changed here. Sorry, sir. So he ended up going back to his previous company, but I still collected the fee, right? So there's situations like that are just kind of out of the ordinary, I would say. Yeah.
That sounds, yeah,
At
out
least
of
he
the
got his
ordinary.
job back. That was good.
All right. So another question is, let's say I'm a candidate. What are 2 or 3 things that I could do as a candidate to put my best foot forward and look great in front of a company? What's your coaching there?
Right. So I would recommend if one's looking, if one's looking for a job on their own, they either got rift, reduction in force, or they got let go recently, or they're currently gainfully employed, but they're looking for another opportunity. Well, first of all, if you're currently employed, you have to be sure you've got to be hyper discreet about the fact that you're looking at other companies because the word potentially can get around. If the word gets around to your current employer, that could jeopardize your current position and that could be pretty career limiting, right?
Right.
So that's one thing. But if you're in between jobs and seeking and looking for an opportunity, um, don't only rely on applying through a website or through a social network or through an applicant tracking system, because you're going to hundreds, if what am I saying? Sometimes even thousands. These companies get thousands of applicants
Right.
per month, so you're going to be lost in the shuffle. So what I recommend is using every omnipresence, omni-channel, like they call it in marketing, using all possible channels, all modalities possible. Meaning in this case, it could be voicemail, it could be texting, it could be in-mail on LinkedIn, it could be direct messages on LinkedIn, it could be calling directly, it could be networking with people within that company to find out who the decision maker is. So just don't rely on one channel of communication because you're not even sure it's going to get the message is going to get to the right person, right?
Right.
And then consequently, the companies, when a company good, maybe some best practices for companies, of course, put the job on your website. Yes, you will get hundreds of, sometimes even thousands of respondents, of people applying. That's going to require you going through a lot of applicants essentially. But also when you hire a recruiter, avoid hiring, you know, 4, 5, 6 recruiters to work on this simultaneously, because they're going to go scour the marketplace. They're probably going to reach out. There's going to be a tremendous amount of overlap between the people that, multiple firms are going to be reaching. And then the company is going to look like candidates are going to get potential candidates are going to getting calls and messages from multiple recruiters about the same opportunity, and that makes the company look desperate, right? And that's a kind of a turn off for candidates, saying, well, if this recruiter and that recruiter and Joe Blow and an old friend of mine are all calling me about the same opportunity, how desperate are they? And then they're going to scrutinize the company a lot more, essentially.
Right.
So
that's
that's
some
my
good
recommendation.
advice. Good advice. So if you're a candidate, tune into Pierre on that one. If you're a company, there's a lot of competition out there. So tune
Sure.
in on that one as well.
Yeah.
All right. So Pierre, when you're not recruiting, what do you do for fun?
For fun, play tennis, a little bit of tennis, a lot of volleyball, jogging as well. I got a half marathon coming up in Norway at the end of the year to see the borealis. What do you call that? The
Aurora Borealis.
borealis.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So that's over the Arctic Circle. That's gonna be cool. I'm gonna do that with my partner. And then what else do I do? I travel. I go to trade shows a lot. Whether it's in Europe or US, California, New York, and so forth. So I get to meet a lot of people at these shows, and also I get to visit, simultaneously visit the city and so forth, and do some tourism there. And then and I ride my bike. I have a fixie, fixed gear bike, so it's a little bit more challenging than your average bike, because you don't coast.
Yep.
You're always pedaling, whether you're going
Yep.
uphill or downhill, and all that. So that keeps you in shape. And then I work out at the gym several times a week, because otherwise I'll be in trouble, right? So there you have it.
Understood.
There you have it.
Understood. All right.
Yeah.
That's the fun stuff. And
Yeah.
lastly, I'll end with, what puts fizz in Pierre's soda these days?
Well, I think, like we talked about earlier, maybe it was before we started the recording, is, I get to change people's destiny. I get to help them in their careers. I had people even I even had people marry. A hiring manager end up hiring a salesperson, and they have getting together, getting along, and they end up getting married and so forth after a few years. So I help them on the professional side as well as the personal side, right? But all in all, just to summarize, and Tony Robbins says this a lot. He says, he calls it destiny technology, where you're helping people, in their careers, improving their income, improving their career, improving their skills, and helping them, evolve in their careers and so forth. And that's rewarding. That is rewarding over the time. Now, not everybody gives you that feedback, but I know, they're thankful. Essentially, they're
Yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure, because they end up, when I call them back 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, they always pick up my calls, or they message me on LinkedIn or send me an email. So they're always thankful for that, essentially. So that's probably the biggest rewarding part of this job, essentially.
Yeah. When you're good at it, you take great care of people, you get them in a great place for them and the company. That's got to be rewarding, and put fizz in your soda, as I say. All right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think we did good here. We got another interview in the can, and it's Small Business Showcase. In fact, don't you listen for a second here, Pierre.
Okay.
So if you're watching this from standpoint of a business and you need people, or you're a candidate and want a better job, I think we just heard somebody who, again, has forgotten more than we'll ever know, and knows this industry and knows how to set us up to win. So I'd run, don't walk, to hang out with Pierre.
Okay.
All right, Pierre, I'm back. So with that, I'm going to say high five. We did good. All right, super.